Welcome back to Pokemon episode summaries. Today, I'm doing episode 426, Wheel of Frontier. The episode begins in the countryside, in a Pokemon Center there. This Pokemon Center was the closest one to the battle arena. Ash was almost there. Ash had just gotten all of his Pokemon back from getting them healed by Nurse Joy. Ash was now very excited for his Battle Frontier battle, and he was prepared too, having done quite a bit of training at the Pokemon Center. He then asked Pikachu if he was prepared, and Pikachu cheered in response. While Ash and Pikachu talked about how excited they were to battle the Battle Arena Frontier Brain and wondered what they could be like and how strong they were, Brock, May, and Max approached Ash and were impressed at the fact that he wasn't nervous whatsoever, but instead just purely excited. Scott was impressed by Ash's excitement too, who had been sitting on a couch in the corner of the Pokemon Center drinking coffee, eavesdropping on Ash and the gang's conversation this entire time, as well as Ash's training. Scott, not wanting to seem too much like a creep, calls Ash over, greeting him from across the Pokemon Center. Ash happily approached Scott, surprised to see him, but happy to, while Brock, May, and Max greeted Scott as well. Scott then asked Ash if he was ready to head for the battle arena, and Ash said that he was confident that he could get his second symbol once he won the battle. And Ash clenched his fist as he and Pikachu promised to get the second frontier symbol no matter what. We then cut to our fighting dojo, and in the middle of the dojo's courtyard, several students wearing karate uniforms were mimicking hand movements from their master, Battle Arena Tycoon Greta. Yeah, that's right, the Battle Arena was also a martial arts place, and the Battle Frontier Brain there, Greta, had a whole bunch of students that she was training in karate. There were practically dozens of students watching and mimicking Greta's every move, while there was the referee of the Battle Arena observing everyone. Amongst these students was actually Team Rocket, who were trying their best to mimic Greta's hand movements, but they weren't doing very well. They were wearing the correct karate uniforms, but the tough training was really wearing them out, and they were all struggling to continue, almost falling over. Jesse was particularly tired of this bullshit and screamed at James and the elf, questioning why they had to do such hard work anyways. Although James reminded Jesse, even though he could barely talk because he was so tired, of the plan and why they were doing this training in the first place. They knew that Ash and the gang would be coming to the battle arena to challenge Greta, the Frontier Brain, and Ash would bring Pikachu with him, and as Meowth added, that would mean that Ash and the gang could potentially have Pikachu stolen from them by Team Rocket if Team Rocket was there. Although Meowth reminded Jesse and James that it was probably best they tried their best to fit in with the rest of the trainees so they didn't attract any attention, so they wouldn't get caught for being bad, and then they wouldn't have a chance to capture Pikachu. Unfortunately for Team Rocket though, since they had stopped following Greta's hand movements because they were so tired, the referee, who was also Greta's assistant, yelled at Team Rocket, demanding them to get back to work and keep moving their arms. Not wanting to raise any more attention to themselves, Team Rocket tiredly agreed and continue their hard training. And it was then time for the next training exercise, which Greta declared she was going to make Team Rocket do for an extra long period of time as punishment for their stopping earlier. This next exercise was to balance bulls on their heads and shoulders while doing a crouch stance, a technique that was used to perfect balance and coordination. Team Rocket tried their absolute best to complete this task, but since they were already tired, and this just was even more strenuous for the three of them, they eventually all collapsed onto the ground, running out of energy, and their bulls fell to the ground and shattered into pieces in the process. So, in response, Greta orders them to exhaust themselves even more by cleaning up their bulls, which hopefully would at least get them some good training. While Team Rocket was doing this, Greta's assistant runs over to Greta, calling her boss, and informs her that he had just received a message from Scott regarding a new challenger coming to face her. Greta was unfazed by this, and certain that she would easily crush any challenger. And Greta simply just goes back to training her students while her assistant watches. Meanwhile, back with Ash and the gang. They were sitting at a little gazebo area in the countryside that had a tree over top of it. And Ash and the gang were listening intently to Scott as he was explaining to Ash and the gang about Greta, the Battle Arena Frontier Brain. Max asked what sort of Pokemon Greta uses, leading Scott to explain that she tended to use Pokemon such as Medicham and Hariyama. Brock remarks that those were both fighting types, and Scott goes on to explain that Greta was a fighting type master, much like Chuck from Cyanwood City in Johto, and Brawly from Dewford Town in Hoenn. In fact, as we see an image of Chuck and Brawly, Scott reveals that Chuck and Brawly were actually Greta's idols, and basically they inspired her to become a fighting type specialist, but Greta was so strong that despite Chuck and Brawly starting before her, Greta was able to get stronger than them. Now that Scott had revealed everything he needed to about Greta, he suggested that they all go on their way to the battle arena. So they all got up and were about to leave the gazebo, but Ash stayed behind and started to think. May and Max turned back, confused that Ash was actually thinking about something for once, as they heard him mutter something about Medicham and Hariyama, indicating he was thinking about how to counter Greta's Pokemon. Scott and Brock noticed Ash thinking as well, and Scott, Brock, and Max and May ask Ash what was wrong, although Ash just runs back to the Pokemon Center, telling the gang and Scott to go ahead, and he would catch up with them later. He had to go do something first. May, Max, and Scott were confused, although Brock came to the conclusion that Ash must have just thought of a strategy. So they went over to the battle arena, and sure enough, right as Brock, May, Max, and Scott arrived, Ash caught up and shouted, "Hello!" But no one responded, so Ash believed that maybe no one was at the battle arena. However, Scott then steps forward and tells Ash that he wouldn't get let into the battle arena with a simple greeting like that, so he instead shouts, "We wish to have a battle," and with that, the giant doors open, and Ash and the gang and Scott walk in. And they were all amazed to see Greta standing at the entrance of the battle arena with a whole group of her martial arts students behind her. Greta greets them and introduces herself formally, while Scott formally introduces Ash and the gang to her, especially Ash, the challenger. Ash confirms that he was the challenger and introduces both himself and Pikachu. Greta admitted that she was very impressed with Ash for having the guts to face her, and was very excited to see the strength that Ash had. Ash was super excited to see Greta's strength as well, and the two of them wanted to fight immediately, as it seemed as though flames were emerging behind them because of the fighting tension, which was only added onto by all of Greta's students chanting, "Yeah, go Arena Tycoon, you got this, yeah." They were really fired up for Greta to win. As for May, Brock, and Max, they were kind of overwhelmed by the intensity of Ash and Greta's interaction, although they just smiled nervously as Greta declared that it was time for a roulette. Ash looked at Greta with confusion, questioning what she meant by this, as a huge roulette wheel emerged out of the ground, and Greta explained the purpose of it. Basically, Ash was supposed to spin the wheel, and whatever number of dots the wheel landed on would be how many Pokemon they would use each. Ash asked if Greta really wanted him to spin the roulette wheel when he'd never done so before, but Greta stated that she wanted Ash to do it to make sure that the battle was fair, and so that Ash knew that she didn't rig it or anything. So Ash spins the roulette wheel, and after some slow spinning, the wheel almost landed on only one Pokemon each, but the wheel officially landed on 2 Pokemon each. So Greta officially declared that it was time for the 2-on-2 battle to begin, as the battle tension resumed, and it seemed like flames were rising up behind Ash and Greta again, which made Brock, May, and Max kind of overwhelmed once again. Jesse, Meowth, and James had observed Ash challenge Greta as they were resting in a far-off corner of the battle arena. Jesse and Meowth were very excited to see Ash and the gang, with Meowth commenting that now they would just have to catch Pikachu, and then they would get promoted by Giovanni. Although James reminded Jesse and Meowth that instead of catching Pikachu, they had something else to do, which was clean the battle arena as per Greta's orders, because Greta had decided to punish Team Rocket some more. Jesse and Meowth tried to argue that they should just disobey Greta and steal Pikachu anyways, but James couldn't even focus on what Jesse and Meowth were saying, because he was too busy actually enjoying himself cleaning the battle arena's floor. Mime Jr. then popped out of its Pokeball and started to help clean as well, leaving Jesse and Meowth disappointed that James didn't care about catching Pikachu, as they tried to come up with a way to themselves, also watching the battle, because it was about to begin, signified by one of Greta's students hitting a gong. Ash and Greta first prepared for their battle, with Greta preparing herself mentally, and Ash giving Pikachu to May, who was going to watch the battle with Brock, Max, and Scott on the sidelines. Also, all of Greta's students were ordered by her to observe on the sidelines as well, so that they could learn something. After all of Greta's students were ready to watch, Greta's assistant got in the middle of the battle arena battlefield, while Greta and Ash got on opposite sides, and Greta's assistant officially declared that it was time for the battle to begin, as Greta sent out the 2 Pokemon that she would be using, since the rule was actually that both trainers had to show off both of their Pokemon before the battle actually started. So Greta revealed that she would be using Medicham and Hariyama, and they stood proudly by her. On the sidelines, Max remarked that Scott was right about the Pokemon that Greta would be using, and Scott just smiled, proud of himself for knowing about Greta, and wondered if Ash had Pokemon good enough to stand up to Hariyama and Medicham. Ash then sent out his 2 Pokemon, Grovyle, and much to May and Max's surprise, Snorlax, because they didn't think Ash had Snorlax on him. Although Brock stated his correct assumption that Ash must have called his Snorlax from Professor Oak's lab specifically for this battle, because when Ash decided to go back to the Pokemon Center, that was why he decided to use Snorlax, so he went to go get it from Oak's lab, using the Pokemon transporter machine at the Pokemon Center. Scott's reaction to Snorlax was one of confusion, since Snorlax was a normal type, and Hariyama was a fighting type, and so was Medicham, so both Pokemon would have an advantage over Snorlax, and it's not like Grovyle was super effective against Medicham or Hariyama either, so Scott kind of doubted that Ash would be able to win. Greta then officially announces that she would be starting off with Hariyama, so in response, Ash starts off with Grovyle, and after Grovyle and Hariyama, as well as Ash and Greta, stare each other down for a bit, the assistant of Greta officially calls for the battle to begin, and Grovyle started off with a quick attack, speeding towards Hariyama, as Greta told Hariyama to defend itself with an arm thrust. So once Grovyle approached Hariyama with the quick attack, Ash decided to catch Greta and Hariyama off guard by stopping the quick attack before it actually made contact with Hariyama, and instead ordering Grovyle to use Bullet Seed, as Grovyle jumped up and fired a whole bunch of Bullet Seeds at Hariyama, but Hariyama's arm thrust still defended it, since the arm thrust was just able to deflect all the Bullet Seeds. Next, Greta tells Hariyama to change arm thrust into an actual attack instead of just using it to block. So Hariyama charges towards Grovyle, going in for an arm thrust, but Grovyle jumps in the air to dodge. And then Grovyle shoots another Bullet Seed, but Hariyama dodges, much to Ash's surprise, as he didn't expect Hariyama to simply be able to dodge by using speed. Next, Hariyama manages to grab hold of Grovyle's leg and slams it down on the ground. Then Hariyama uses arm thrust again, and it grabs Grovyle once again and throws it against a nearby wall, making dust arise. This frustrates Ash, but he tells Grovyle to use a quick attack, noting that Grovyle would need to contend with Hariyama's own speed. So Grovyle manages to get back up and races towards Hariyama with a quick attack, but Hariyama just uses its speed to dodge once again. But in the process, Hariyama had turned its back toward Grovyle, so Ash saw a chance to attack, calling for a Leaf Blade, which sliced hard against Hariyama and sent it crashing to the ground. Although Greta wasn't worried at all, even Ash ordered another Leaf Blade, because when Grovyle went to go use this attack, Greta ordered Hariyama to retaliate with Focus Punch. So Hariyama prepared this attack while Grovyle was moving towards it, and after focusing all of its energy into its hand, Hariyama punches Grovyle right as it approaches, smashing Grovyle square on the chest and stopping Grovyle from attacking as it was sent flying and crashing into the roof before falling back onto the floor, causing a dust cloud to emerge. And when the dust cloud cleared, it was revealed that Grovyle was defeated. So Greta's assistant officially announced that Grovyle was unable to battle. So the score was 1-0 for Greta. Greta then congratulates her Hariyama, as Brock remarked that he was amazed that not even Grovyle's speed was able to give Ash the win, since Hariyama had both strength and speed. Scott remarked that the power of Hariyama's Focus Punch was sure a force to be reckoned with, and he also commended Greta on using a classic fighting type expert technique, using an opponent's speed to increase their own physical power. Because if Grovyle was fast, even if Hariyama wasn't fast, then Hariyama could just attack Grovyle harder using the force of Grovyle's speed. Greta then compliments Ash on doing his best and using Grovyle's speed, but states that there was no way Ash could win, but Ash states that the battle was just beginning. As he sent out his second and last Pokemon, Snorlax, which Max, May, Brock, and Scott were skeptical about due to Snorlax being a normal type. But Greta simply declared that she was going to keep using her Hariyama, not substitute in her Medicham yet. As Greta shouted encouragements to her Hariyama, Team Rocket were continuing to watch the battle, even James. And James was even starting to get annoyed at the fact that they weren't going to be able to catch Pikachu, since the battle was already almost over, it seemed like. Greta then started off the battle by having Hariyama use Arm Thrust several times, but Ash decided to go on the defensive and told Snorlax to use Protect, which effectively made all of Hariyama's many Arm Thrusts useless. But Hariyama still continued to use Arm Thrust regardless. He was able to send Snorlax flying back, kicking up dust in the process, even though Snorlax was still standing uninjured, which made Greta smile, confident that soon the Protect would be so ineffective that Hariyama would actually be able to do damage to Snorlax, as she ordered Hariyama to simply use Arm Thrust again. Ash, knowing that Protect wouldn't work, though, simply told Snorlax to dodge out of the way and then use Headbutt, and Snorlax did so, dodging the Arm Thrust and smashing its head straight into Hariyama, which pushes Hariyama back, impressing Scott, Brock, Max, and Nate. Greta simply smiled, not worried at all, as she told Hariyama to use its strongest attack once more, as Hariyama did so, clenching its fist, focusing its energy for another Focus Punch, and once it had enough energy stored up, Hariyama ran towards Snorlax. Ash, knowing what Focus Punch was capable of, decided that it was best for Snorlax to use Protect again, since the Protect would be at full strength, since Snorlax had stopped using it. However, the force of the Focus Punch was so strong that it sent Snorlax flying back, even though it was protecting itself, effectively making the Protect useless, which Greta smiled at. With Snorlax now having landed on its back, Greta told Hariyama to finish the battle off, assuming that Snorlax was severely weakened, and telling Hariyama to use one final Focus Punch, as Hariyama charges up energy again and jumps towards Snorlax. And however, after some encouragement from Ash, Snorlax was able to get up just in time, and jumped out of the way of the Focus Punch, so Hariyama's fist slammed straight into the ground, hurting its hand, as Hariyama was forced to grasp its hand in pain. And since Hariyama's hand was injured, Ash saw that its main way of attacking was now compromised, so Ash saw a chance to take advantage of this and told Snorlax to use an Ice Punch. And this strong Ice Punch freezes Hariyama into an ice block, which falls to the ground. Since Hariyama was frozen, Greta's assistant, the referee, officially declared Hariyama unable to battle, since it couldn't get up, and also, it had fainted while frozen, so with that, the score was now 1-1. Max, Brock, May, and Scott all cheered, very pleased with Ash's victory, with Scott especially pleased with the fact that Snorlax was able to overcome its type disadvantage. Without further ado, it was now time for the final battle, since Greta sent out her last Pokemon to face Ash's Snorlax, Medicham, who started off by doing some acrobatics in the air and landing while going into a yoga pose. In response, Snorlax waves its arms and does a little pose of its own, as Ash wishes Snorlax luck, and May and Max encourage Ash and Snorlax, wishing them both luck as well. As for Team Rocket, Jesse and James were very bored, doing absolutely nothing, just sitting and watching, and they were also stressed out since it was now the last battle, and Jesse and James ranted about how they may never have a chance to get Pikachu unless they just decided to reveal themselves and try and steal Pikachu right now, although Meowth tells both James and Jesse to wait a little bit longer. Anyways, the battle then begins with Greta telling Medicham to start things off with a Focus Punch. So Medicham spins around and disappears, moving too fast for anyone to see, and having caught Snorlax off guard by this, along with Ash and the gang. Medicham suddenly reappeared in front of Snorlax, but right before Medicham's attack could make contact, Ash told Snorlax to use Protect, and Snorlax did. So Medicham's attack didn't do much damage to Snorlax, only sending it back a little bit, kicking up some more dust in the process. Medicham then immediately followed up with a high jump kick, smashing its knee straight into Snorlax, actually sending it flying back, fully nullifying the Protect. With the Protect down, Greta saw a chance to use another Focus Punch, so Medicham sped towards Snorlax. Just as Snorlax managed to stand up after some encouragement from Ash, but Brock, May, Max, and even Ash were worried because they knew that Snorlax didn't have much energy left. Before the Focus Punch could hit Snorlax, Ash told it to use a Hyper Beam to stop the attack, but unfortunately, Medicham was able to dodge the Hyper Beam very skillfully by twisting around, and once the Hyper Beam was fully dissipated, it used Focus Punch on Snorlax, hitting it from behind, sending Snorlax flying back. Snorlax actually ends up going flying into several of Greta's students, who run away to avoid the multiple 100-pound Snorlax, perhaps even 1,000-pound Snorlax, from falling on them. However, Team Rocket, who were hiding behind the actual students, failed to notice Snorlax because they were too busy plotting when they should get Pikachu, and since the students were not shielding them, Snorlax landed just by them, and the force of Snorlax's weight landing by them knocked them right onto the battle arena, and also managed to knock them out of their martial art uniforms. Team Rocket were so busy dealing with the pain that they didn't even realize their martial arts uniforms had came off, but they did notice when Ash saw them and called them out, asking them what they wanted. So Team Rocket decided to recite their motto, declaring their plan to steal Pikachu, since they might as well go up with their plan if their disguises were already unveiled. Mime Jr. also joins in on the motto. Upon hearing the name Team Rocket, Greta actually recognized them and called them out as Pokemon thieves, criticizing them, and told all of her students to be sure to keep their Pokemon safe, so Team Rocket wouldn't go after them. Although Jessie just smiled smugly at Greta, telling her that they only cared about Pikachu as they jumped towards May to go grab him. But Ash tells Pikachu to use Thunderbolt, which sends Team Rocket blasting off, breaking some glass in the battle arena in the process. Team Rocket were bitchy to have been blasted off, but they were at least glad they didn't have to clean that glass. Greta officially declares that with the nuisance that was Team Rocket now gone, it was time for the battle to resume, and Ash agreed. So Greta's assistant officially called the battle on again, and Greta started off by having her Medicham simply charge towards Snorlax, while Ash orders Snorlax to use Ice Punch on it, hoping to freeze Medicham like he did Hariyama. However, much to Ash's surprise, Greta tells Medicham to use Ice Punch as well, since it could use it. Ash hoped that Snorlax's Ice Punch would be more powerful, but what he didn't account for was that Medicham was more agile and faster, so Medicham's Ice Punch hit before Snorlax's did, so Snorlax was frozen into a block of ice before it could actually use its own Ice Punch. The Ice Punch was so strong that it created some smoke, so it took a little while for everyone to see that Snorlax was encased in ice, but it was, which shocked Scott, May, Brock, and Max, because they thought Snorlax would have been able to overpower Medicham, unaware of the whole speed factor, as Max questioned what Ash could do when Snorlax was essentially useless now that it was frozen. Ash, however, came up with the only thing that he could possibly do, noting that there was a counter strategy to being frozen in ice for Snorlax, as he told it to use Rest, which made Snorlax fall asleep inside the block of ice. May and Max were confused by Ash's strategy, but Scott and Brock knew. Basically, Ash was having Snorlax regain its energy by using Rest while it was trapped, and he knew that Medicham wouldn't just sit there and do nothing, so it would try and break Snorlax out of the ice anyways, and once Snorlax was free, it would be full power, since it would have been restored by Rest. Greta admitted that she was impressed with Ash's Rest strategy, and fully knew his intention for Medicham to free Snorlax, and revealed that she would free Snorlax, but even if Snorlax was back at full power, it wouldn't stop her from winning. And she tells Medicham to attack Snorlax and try and break it out from the ice by using a Focus Punch, hoping to injure it a lot while doing so, even more so than Snorlax was getting healed, to basically do more damage than Snorlax was regaining health. So, Medicham uses many Focus Punches, breaking the ice, while Snorlax continues to rest, and Ash grits his teeth, telling Snorlax under his breath to do his best and hang on, and not take any extra damage from the Focus Punches. Then, while May, Brock, Max, and Scott were praying that Snorlax would be okay, after several Focus Punches, the top of the ice breaks off, unveiling Snorlax's head. Max then panics as he sees Medicham go for a high jump kick, although this kind of worked in Ash's favor a little bit, because the high jump kick managed to destroy the rest of the ice, setting Snorlax free, although it was still sleeping. Right as Medicham jumped up to use another high jump kick, though, on the now free Snorlax, Snorlax managed to wake up, and right as Medicham spun around and was about to strike Snorlax, Ash shouted at Snorlax to dodge, and Snorlax dodged quickly, impressing Greta with Snorlax's quick movements, as Ash smiles, proud of Snorlax, before ordering it to use Hyper Beam on Medicham, as Snorlax jumps into the air and fires off a Hyper Beam, to add on even more damage to Medicham, even though it had already taken a whole bunch after suffering a whole bunch of recoil damage after missing high jump kick. Unfortunately, Medicham was able to dodge the Hyper Beam and then use the Focus Punch to send Snorlax flying back, making Brock, May, Max, and Scott worry a little bit. However, Ash just told Snorlax to use Hyper Beam once again, but the Hyper Beam couldn't be unleashed for some reason, which shocked Max, May, and Scott, although Brock remembered the reason for this, which was that Hyper Beam needed to recharge before it could be used a second time in a row. So yeah, it had to recharge first. Greta saw that Medicham now had a chance to attack, since Snorlax's attack had failed, and ordered to use Focus Punch again, as Medicham ran towards Snorlax and quickly unleashed the Focus Punch. Snorlax couldn't fight back, obviously, because Hyper Beam couldn't be used and it had to charge it up, and it couldn't switch to another attack while the Hyper Beam was charging. So Snorlax simply tried its best to dodge, frustrating Ash, as he told Snorlax to use the attack as soon as it could, but Snorlax took a while to charge, and it was also struggling to move while it recharged, because it was really focusing all its energy on recharging, so it was forced to get hit many times by Focus Punches. Eventually, just as the Hyper Beam was fully charged up, Greta told Medicham to use its final, most powerful Focus Punch yet. Just as his Focus Punch was about to hit Snorlax, however, Ash instructed Snorlax to fire Hyper Beam at the ground, to essentially use the force of the Hyper Beam to launch itself up into the air, therefore dodging the Focus Punch, shocking Greta, as Ash tells Snorlax to Body Slam Medicham, full power. So, since the Hyper Beam had launched Snorlax all the way up to the ceiling, Snorlax used a full power Body Slam to slam down and absolutely crush Medicham, bringing up dust in the process. And once the dust had cleared and Snorlax got off of Medicham, it was revealed that Medicham had been knocked out. So, Greta's assistant, the referee, officially declared that Medicham was unable to battle, and Ash and Snorlax were the winners. Greta was shocked, while Ash hugged his Snorlax in happiness, celebrating her victory, while May, Max, Brock, and Scott, and Pikachu cheered. The episode then ends with Ash and gang, Scott, and Greta going outside of the battle arena, and Greta congratulates Ash on his victory. And both Scott and Greta commend Ash on his battle skills, especially Ash being able to beat Greta's fighting types despite his type disadvantage, and Ash responds that he hadn't had such fun battling in a long time. Greta then awards Ash his second frontier symbol, the Guts symbol, proof that he fought in the battle arena with guts. Ash and Pikachu then do their usual victory pose, proudly holding up the gut symbol as Brock, May, and Max congratulate Ash on his victory. And Scott then informs Ash that the next frontier brain that he would have to face was located in a facility known as the Battle Dome, which was south of Lavender Town. Greta told Ash to keep up that fiery spirit when he battled his next opponents, and for all of his future opponents, and Ash promised that he would, as Ash and the gang left the battle arena, saying goodbye to Scott and Greta, and Ash and the gang returned to the Pokemon Center in the countryside, so Ash could give his Snorlax back to Professor Oak, and then they continued on their journey, now heading towards Lavender Town. As the episode ended with Ash and the gang walking through a forest towards Lavender Town, or at least close to it, since the Battle Dome was south of Lavender Town.